Hey guys, Joyce-Anne Anthony, aka JJ. This video is tips and shortcuts that I've learned so far with using the grease pencil in Blender. Since this video is going to be so long, I think my longest video to date, I've divided it into chapters. Hopefully that will make it easier for navigating if you wanted to jump to like chapter 6 or chapter 9. For majority of this video, I'm using Blender 4.1.1, but towards the end, I use Blender 4.2 Alpha. Now we got that out the way, let's get started. Okay, I'm gonna start at Google and go to blender.org, their website. And right now, at the date of this recording, the most current version of Blender is Blender 4.1, and you can click download and download Blender 4.1.1, and I am using a Mac. If you scroll down on this download page, you can also click what's new and see all the features. And if you keep going down, there are the experimental versions of Blender. These experimental builds have the latest features, but they are more prone to crashing. So right here, they have it in bold. Use it at your own risk. So I could go into Blender 4.2 Alpha and play with the settings, but it is more prone to crashing. Okay, I'm going to download Blender 4.1.1 and I'll see you when it's opened. When you open Blender, this splash screen will appear, and they like to feature Blender artists. And you also have these options: the new file, open previous, recover last session. These are the previous files that I've worked on. You can also donate and see what's new. For the grease pencil, I mainly use the 2D animation file and the general file, but for right now, we're going to open up the 2D animation. When it's opened, this white part is the viewport, and this is where I do your drawing or your animation work. I usually call it a canvas, but the formal name is viewport. To the right is the outliner panel, and it lists the various elements such as the grease pencil objects, layers, camera, lights, etc. Beneath that is the properties panel, and it provides controls for various aspects of your scene like the camera, object properties, materials, modifiers. And at the very bottom is the dope sheet, and this is the timeline for your animation. It allows you to manage keyframes, adjust the timing, and control the animation sequence. At the top left is draw mode. There are a total of 6 different modes when you click on the 2D animation file. The draw mode is where you can use your mouse or your graphics tablet to draw directly on the screen. And right under draw mode, these are the 8 default brushes that come with Blender. The default is the pencil, and you can always click on it to change the brush. And right here, these are the 4 default materials. To add more materials, I would go to the properties panel. Again, that's to the right. And if I go down, well, first is the data object properties, in which has the layers. And right now I'm in the lines and fills. But again, to add another material, I would go to the material properties tab, and this is where I can adjust the colors and style. And the one under that is the stroke fill, and while the other 2 are strokes, this one is just a fill. And the final default material is the dot stroke. So we've been playing with the 4 default materials, but again, you can always go in and change it or adjust it. In the data object properties, if you click the eye, it turns off the layer visibility or turns it on. I'm gonna click on the fill layer. I'm gonna have this separate. And I'm going to click the plus to add a new material. And I want this just to be a fill, no stroke. You can do fill, stroke, or combine them to do a stroke and fill. And I want this to be blue. Let me scroll back up. You can click these arrows right here to move the material up or down. Maybe I want to lock this blue fill every time I use the pencil. So I would click this pen material. Once I have that enabled, every time I click this pencil brush, it will automatically go to the blue fill. Again, for the fill and the stroke, you can always click base color to change the color, and anything that's under that material will change colors. You also can change the style to gradient or texture. And I'm going to do like a pink and green. A texture, you would need to import some type of texture image. I'm going to go back to gradient. And you have all these settings: blend, flip colors. You can change the location, rotation, scale. If you want to see what it looks like, you can kind of see the icon, but to make it bigger, there's preview. Of the two paint modes, we've been playing with the materials. Now I want to go to the color attribute. And that is going to be right there. The difference is material paint mode, you can change so much. It's kind of like a complete makeover. You can change the texture, the line type, and the color. But the color attribute, you can just change the color. But you don't have to keep going to material, like adding a new material to adjust the color. I can just click on the base color and change it. So there's differences between both paint modes. The color attribute will copy whatever the material is in, because right now it's in fill, but I'm just going to add a new layer. I honestly could have just selected a stroke, but I just added a new material, and this time I wanted stroke. So now when I go in, it will be a stroke. At the top you have radius, which determines the size of your strokes. And right next to the number is this use pressure option, and it responds to how hard you press down while drawing with a graphics tablet, which I'm using right now. I turn that back on. And strength, I like to think of that like opacity. The lower you make the strength, the more opaque or transparent it becomes. Right here you have two cap types. The default is round. But the other option, I'm going to go back to the object data properties, and I'm going to hide this fill layer and just click the plus to add a new layer. This advanced drop-down provides additional settings and options that allows us to fine-tune our drawing and customize certain aspects of the workflow, like input samples, and it kind of like adjusts the sensitivity of your digital pen or pencil. The purpose of active smooth is to reduce the appearance of jagged or uneven strokes. It's really useful for creating smooth outlines, like intricate details or like fluid animations where smoothness and precision are really important. You also have angle, factor, hardness. The stroke drop-down gives you more options for post-processing, randomize, and stabilized stroke. You have smooth, iteration, subdivisions. Right now I'm on simplify, which reduces the final points in the stroke with an adaptive algorithm. There's also the option to trim stroke ends. Randomize, it adds randomness to the position of the points along the stroke, and the options are radius, strength, UV, the hue, saturation value, and jitter. I really like the strength randomize, and I'm gonna click that to use pressure to randomize. It kind of gives like a watercolor effect. For hue, saturation, and value, you have to be in the color attribute option for it to be enabled. So I'm going to switch that really fast. I'm going to enable stroke randomness. So now the hues will be coming out at a random color. And the last option is the stabilization stroke, which helps reduce jitter of the strokes when drawing by it delays and corrects the location of the points. I'm going to turn off stabilization stroke there. Another way to do it is when you're in draw mode, holding down shift gives the same effect. But in stabilization stroke, you can adjust more of the settings. It's a little too busy for me, so I'm gonna go back to the object data properties and then hide these layers and then click plus for a new layer. I double click on it to be able to rename the layer. For the next exercise, I'm going to change it back to materials. And I'm gonna select the gradient and draw that. Now I'm going to select my blue and I want to draw another square, but I want it to be behind my gradient square. I would have to go to the top if I want this to be on the same layer of my drawing options and select draw on back. So with that enabled, anything I draw now will be behind the gradient square. Next to that is auto merge, and it joins new strokes with the beginning or end of the previously drawn strokes in the active layer. Next is the add weight data. It adds weight to new strokes according to the vertex group. So I'm just going to draw a stroke and go to the data properties tab and scroll down, and then scroll down to the vertex groups, click plus, and then if I scroll down, I went to edit mode because I thought you could only really see the stroke in edit mode, but yeah. So if you scroll down the vertex group, you're able to adjust the weight. The default is 1, but you're able to go in there and adjust it. According to the manual, this is useful for like cutout animation for adding new drawings on the same vertex group without needing to create it afterwards. I want to delete this stroke, so I'm clicking in edit mode, X, and then delete strokes. So back to draw mode. I'm going to delete that too. Additive drawing, it creates new frames, adding strokes with drawing tools. The strokes from the previous frame are included as the basis for the new one. So I'm going to zoom into my dope sheet at the bottom. Without it enabled, if I go to frame number 2 and just draw a heart, I want it to be connected. I want it to stay all on the same frame. It's just kind of making this animation, which is nice, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for. When I stop on a frame, what you see right now is onion skinning. So if I go to the draw grease pencil to I'm on Viewport, so yeah, the draw grease pencil, it is enabled right there. So onion skinning, it allows you to see drawings from the frames before and after what you're currently working on. And it's like used to help you if you want to create smooth animations. If I scroll down my data object properties, there is an onion skinning drop down, and you're able to maybe want to change the colors of before or after. You can also adjust the keyframes before. Right now I have it every keyframe to before and after. I'll see the colors, but you can do 2, 3, you can adjust the settings, and yeah, you can adjust the opacity. But yeah, that is onion skinning. Back to my drawing, I'm just pressing Command Z on the Mac to undo everything, all the frames. and starting again back on frame number 1. So now I am going to enable additive drawing. So now when I go to frame number 2, everything should stay. Well, I'm gonna do that. Yes, okay. And I'm just gonna keep going to another frame. You get it. And yeah, so right now I have 7 frames, and I'm going to turn on multi-frame, which allows you to draw on several frames at the same time. The one mistake I did when I did this, I went from draw mode to sculpt mode, and with push enabled, I wanted to kind of make my heart kind of like leaning over, and I'm gonna go, and I went to the first frame thinking this would, as you can see, it goes right back when you go to frame 2, and that is a mistake I made. It actually says it when you hover over multi-frame that you need to have the keyframe selected. Right there it says in parentheses, keyframes must be selected to be influenced. So I'm selecting all of them by holding down Shift. And then when I go back, well, I'm gonna do that to frame 5. So if I go back to sculpt mode with push and I move it, it should be influenced on every single frame. Next, I want to play with the different stroke placements, which could be seen at the top. And I think it's best seen when you're out of camera view, which we're in right now. So you can click this camera icon or hold down the scroll with your mouse. Right here is the navigate, and I'm just holding down my mouse, my trackpad to move around the scene, or my scroll, sorry, not trackpad, my scroll. For me, when I'm drawing a scene, I like to go to Viewport overlays and turn on the X and Y axis. Again, for me, it's just personal preference. I also like to go to Draw Grease Pencil and turn on the canvas option. You can't really see it right here. Right now the opacity is at 0.5, but you can go in and adjust it. It just helps guide me on where my strokes are going to come. Right now the stroke placement, the default is the origin. So strokes are going to be placed at the origin point, and I like to think of it where X and Y meet. Up next is the 3D cursor. Strokes are going to be placed where the 3D cursor is located, but you can't see it. So I'm going to go back to Viewport overlays and turn on the 3D cursor option, and there it is right there. But if I draw like, it's just going to be on top. I'm going to move it. So I'm going to select the cursor right there and just click it to the side. So now when I draw, my strokes will be right there where the 3D cursor is shortcut Shift right click with your mouse. Surface is where strokes follow the surface of a 3D objects in the scene. It kind of like wraps around them as if they were drawn directly on the surface itself. But to see that, I'm going to go to object mode and go to add, mesh, and I'm going to do a square. As you can see, it appeared where my cursor was. So I'm going to go back to, well, I need to select the grease pencil. I'm going to go back to draw mode. And I'm turn off multi-frame. I didn't realize multi-frame was still on, but I'm going to draw a heart. And doesn't it look like the heart was drawn directly on it? But actually it was not. If you want to adjust this, you need to change the settings of the offset. So I'm going to change it to like 0.00, like I'll do 10. So now when I draw the heart, it will be closer to my 3D mesh. and finally stroke, and it continues from the end of the previous stroke, creating a continuous line or stroke path. I like to, I meant to move the 3D cursor. Reminder, it is shift right click and you're able to move the 3D cursor. I'm on a Mac, so I just press the tilde button to appear this view menu, and that helps me if I want to change from top view, side view, front view. I change the brush to ink pen, and I'm just gonna draw a tree. And I'm just using the navigation to move around the scene. So you have 3 different options: all points, endpoints. It's where the endpoints, the operation snaps to the first and last points of the stroke. And when I drew the last branch, it kind of connected to my heart because I had the endpoint selected. And again, it snaps to the first and last points of a stroke. Now that we've gone over the 4 different stroke placements, there is actually 5 different drawing planes. The default is front view, which we are in right now. The drawing planes help select the plane in which newly created strokes are drawn. Front, the strokes are drawn on the plane determined by the X and Z axis, the front view. The view, strokes are drawn with the current 3D viewport orientation. So wherever I move, that's where the new strokes will be created. Side, strokes are drawn on the plane determined by the Y and Z axis. Top, strokes are drawn on the X and Y axis. And then finally, the cursor is where the strokes are drawn with the current 3D cursor orientation. So I'm just moving it so you can see. And those are the 5 different plane options. Up next are the guides, which they're drawing aids that make it easier to create different types of strokes. And I'm just going to move the cursor over here so it's easier to be seen. And I'm going to enable. I need to click on that. And if you notice, there's like a little pink circle. Once you see that, that's how you know that guides are enabled. So I'm going to turn it off. But do you see that pink? So there are 5 different guide types. There's circular, radial, parallel, grid, and isometric. But yeah, the guides are a lot of fun to play with. At the top right, I've briefly gone over it, but you have selectability and visibility. I have the mesh right there, so I can turn off visibility if I want to. And you have these different options. Next to that is viewport gizmos, right, that I can turn off the navigation. Or if I want to turn off all of them, I can just select that and everything disappears, but I would like to keep that on. And then you have the viewport overlays. This is again where I turn on the X and Y axis. I can turn on the 3D cursor. And to the right of that is the draw grease pencil. And this is where I turn on my onion skin or canvas. I don't have vertex paint selected, but if I did, that would adjust the opacity. So yeah, those are those 4 options, 4 menu options. To go back into camera mode, I'm just going to select the camera icon, And again, to get out, I hold down my scroll and I'm moving around my mouse, and that's how I'm able to rotate around this screen. And that's orthographic. You have orthographic or perspective view. Okay, I'm going to go back to object data properties and the layers. I'm going to hide all the other layers, and I'm going to move my cursor from where it is, and I'm going to select show placement to the origin, and to my cursor back to the world origin. I'm clicking Shift S, and then I'm going to select cursor to world origin. So there you go, and moved it back. And I am going to go back to camera view and back to the layers option. I'm going to click plus to add a new layer, and again, if you double click it, you're able to rename it. Okay, I'm just going to draw a stroke, and I want to go in and delete it. I can go to the eraser, but oh no, it's erasing the other layers as well. I do not want that, so I just click Ctrl Z to undo, and you can click this drop down right here, and I go to auto lock and active layers. So all the other layers, they will not be affected when I go in and erase. The eraser has 3 different options: dissolve, point, and stroke. Stroke is the fastest if I want the whole stroke to just be erased. And I'm going to draw a stroke again, and a shortcut is holding down Control, and that just erased the whole stroke. It's going to erase whatever you have the settings in. So I'm going to draw a circle, and then we'll go back to my materials. I'll just click the blue. Under that is the fill, and that just fills in the strokes. And this is the tool menu that we're going over right now. We did the eraser. This is the tint. So I'm just gonna do it, and it will tint my stroke and fill, because that's what I have selected. If I only wanted the stroke to be tinted, I'm clicking Control Z to undo. Now, right now, only my stroke will be tinted. And you can play a lot with that with different colors. And those are just the layers. And if you have external brushes, you can load it by clicking that. That is the cutter. So I'm just gonna draw, I need a stroke. I'm gonna draw a stroke, and the cutter tool will just cut off the end. Maybe because if you want it more precise. That is the eyedropper tool, and anything I select with the eyedropper, it will automatically make a new material. Let me demonstrate. So now anything that I select, it will just automatically make a new stroke material. Underneath the eyedropper, you have 6 different shape tools. You have line, polyline, arc, curve, box, and circle. And I'm just hiding the other layers so you can see it better. And it will make these 2 lines. You can adjust it, but once you're ready for the line, you're gonna press enter. At the top, you can change the subdivisions, the radius, and the strength. Let's see. And for this, every time you click it, it will make a new shape until you press enter. Let's go down to the circle so you can see more of the subdivisions. So right now it's at 94, and it can make a circle, oval. I'm gonna press enter. If I hold down shift with the circle, it will make a perfect circle. And again, the subdivisions are at 94. I'm gonna take it down to 1, and that makes a triangle. At the top, you can also adjust the thickness profile. Okay, I have it enabled. Let's see. Oh. And you can adjust this profile. Is it a profile, a graph? To also continue to adjust the thickness profile. Okay. I'm going to draw another, because I'm going to show you guys a gap closure. I'm just going to draw something in it. I forgot to close it. So what happens now? If I go in and I try to fill it, I'm going to get an error message. Unable to fill unclosed area. So right now, if I go down to advanced and I adjust the gap, see right now it's obvious to see where the gap is, but sometimes you can't see it. So now it will automatically close it. So if I click it one more time, it will fill it in for me. Up here you have two more settings. With the paintbrush selected, you have the precision parameter, which controls the accuracy or smoothness of the strokes you draw with the paintbrush tool, and then dilate/contrast. It adjusts the thickness and contrast of the strokes. But remember, you have to be with the paintbrush tool selected. Back to the layers. If I wanted to see every layer, I can manually select the eye for each, or I could do this drop down and click show all. Or if I didn't want to, again, that is auto locking all the inactive layers, and then hide all. So there's a lot of great settings with this drop down. You can duplicate empty keyframes, merge down, merge all the layers into one. Two things I use a lot when I'm coloring my character is assigning colors and mask. So I just added a color underneath the inking layer, and I am going to color in my character right now, both my characters, with one skin tone. Both of my characters now are filled in, but I actually want the character on the right, her skin to be just a little bit lighter. If I went to the materials tab right now and adjust it, go down to fill and adjust the color, so both characters would change, but that's not what I want. I just want the character on the right to change. So I'm going to click plus new, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to turn off stroke because I want this just to be a fill. I'm going to click the base color and the eyedrop to click the skin tone that it is right now, and then I'm just going to go in and make it a little bit brighter, lighter. And nothing is changing because I need to go to edit mode and select my second character's head. And now when I click assign, it will change the color. Another thing, and I changed her skin tone off camera, I like to use mask. So when I want to add shadows and lighting to my character, I add a new layer on top of the coloring layer. I'm going to select the circle right next to the text, and that made a mask. I'm going to scroll down and click the layer that I want it to be masked, and that is the coloring layer. And I'm going to switch from material to color attributes, and I'm going to make the color a little bit darker for the shadows. And since it's masked, when I'm creating the shadows, it won't go out of the coloring her skin tone layer. In the mask layer, you can click the invert button to invert the shadows, or you can turn it off by clicking the eye. Also, right under the layers, you have the different blend modes that you can adjust. And under the blend modes, you can adjust the opacity of the whole layer. Blender also has modifiers and visual effects. Modifiers are like automatic operations that affect an object in a non-destructive way. Some of my favorite modifiers are the build modifier, which makes strokes appear or disappear in a frame range. It creates the effect of lines being drawn, or you can do it reverse, lines being erased. Each modifier also has settings that you can adjust. The next modifier is the dot dash modifier, and this generates dot dash segments from the original stroke. Let me zoom out. I could also make a quick animation with the dot dash. So I'm gonna make it really blurry and make sure my frame is at 1, and I'm going to click the keyframes, and then I'm gonna move the playhead to about 100, and then I'm gonna adjust it to make it look closer to the original, like that. And yeah, I'll keep it like that. So when I play it, it will create the effect of the dot dash modifier slowly going away. Kind of like a painterly effect, kind of. If I wanted to keep it like this, I would click the drop down and, well, I'm gonna exit, but you can click the drop down and apply it, or you duplicate, and there's also other settings. But I'm going to delete this. And another modifier I use a lot is the noise modifier. It changes the value of one or more of the stroke points properties like location, strength, thickness, and it provides like these values to make the line unsteady and noisy. And you can create a lot of fun animations with this. It kind of gives your artwork some movement. And finally, the hue and saturation modifier. It applies a color transformation to the object output color. And you can adjust the stroke and fill, or just the fill. Right under the modifiers is the visual effects, and these create real-time visual effects that can be applied to the object. Visual effects are a little bit different than modifiers. Visual effects treat the object like it's an image, so it affects the whole object and you can't limit its influence. Like modifiers, you could do the layer, the material. Just like the modifiers though, I'm making a quick animation with the visual effect. Another effect is glow, which adds a glowing rim around the object. Normally for glow, I'll move up the threshold and then just adjust the X and Y axis to get the desired effect that I want. Now I want to transition to viewport overlays. I am going to go to File, Open Recent. One thing I like is when you hover over the blend file, it kind of gives you like a preview. And I'm going to open up a drawing that I did last year. So when you open up a file, it opens up completely black. That's because it opens in solid mode, and this mode is good for modeling and sculpting. Obviously I'm doing a 2D artwork, so it doesn't really apply to me, and you can find that on the top right. The other modes are wireframe, which only displays the edges of the objects in the scene. The third mode is material preview. This mode is particularly suited for previewing materials and painting textures. As you see, I have a light. You can't see it. That means I'm going to go to rendered view, and there you can see my lighting. It shows what the rendered file will look like. In the data object properties tab, under opacity, you can turn on lights. That's what I'm doing right now. So if you don't want light to affect your 2D drawing, you can disable it, but I'm going back in, enabling it. Each object gets transformed around its origin point. So if right now I'm just pressing G and then I press along the Y axis, everything moves along the origin point. And in this drop down, you have different options like global and local, but they provide flexibility and precision in manipulating objects within the 3D space. And I'm gonna click transform, affect only the origins, because I'm gonna move my origin point. And there's also, you can also affect the transformation at the top right there. Global, the default, aligns the transformation axis to world space. Local aligns the transformation axis to the active object's orientation. Right now, if I try to rotate, it's right where the origin point is, and to move it, again, I have that selected, the origin point, and I'm just clicking G, and I am moving it. I'll move it to maybe his chest. So now when I rotate, everything will move right there. Well, actually, I'm going to deselect it. And then when I move it, everything will be right there. Make sure you unselect it when you move the origin point to where you want it to be. Now that we've gone over origin point, if I click shortcut period, I can change the pivot point. The difference between the two is an origin point is a fixed reference point within the object's geometry, and the pivot point is more dynamic. It's a more dynamic point where you can adjust to control how the transforms affect the objects. So like I can change the pivot point to the 3D cursor, individual origins, or the active element. And some shortcuts to know: G to grab, R to rotate. I'm pressing S right now to scale. And right now I'm just pressing grab, but if you click the transform, you can, it combines everything, rotation, scale. Under that is annotate. So maybe I finish this and I want to send this blend file to someone, and they can annotate and make notes directly in the blend file. You can adjust the color, you can just adjust the placement, also the opacity and thickness. Underneath that is the measure tool, which is an interactive tool where you can drag lines in the scene to measure distances or angles. And underneath the measure is the add cube, which you can interactively add a cube mesh object. And if you hold it down, you actually can add other shapes too. So what you do first is by dragging my left mouse button, I try to get the bottom of the shape. Let me just do it right there. And then when I let go, it's going to see how high do I want it. So then I press the left mouse button again and it's entered. And if I hold it down, there's 5 different meshes I can make. And then it's the same process. I'm using my left mouse button to click, and then I click again to adjust the height of the mesh. Right next to object mode is view, which has a lot of settings to adjust the camera, but the top 2 settings are the toolbar. If you press shortcut T, it will hide the toolbar, or if you press N, that will hide the sidebar on the right. Right now, if I go into camera view, if I click the camera icon, I see that my camera is kind of too far to the left. I'm gonna adjust that. One way you can do that, make sure first you select the camera. I'm holding down the scroll wheel to move, but nothing's happening with my camera because I need to lock it. So if I go under camera to view, under view lock, now when I move right now I'm moving my scroll wheel, my camera moves with it. And when I have it where I want, I'm gonna make sure to unselect it, because if not, every time I move, my camera will move with me. The other way to lock your camera is to be in camera mode, then select this lock right here underneath it, and now wherever I move and adjust the view, the camera will follow. And again, when you have the view where you want, select the lock so it unlocks, and now when you move, the camera won't follow you. So again, at the top you have the view option, which allows you to navigate and explore your 3D scene from different perspectives. Next to that is select, which allows you to choose objects or elements within your scene. After that is add, which enables you to insert objects, lights, or shapes into your project. And finally, object, where you'll find a list of commands and settings specifically related to the selected objects in your scene, like transform, set origin, parent. I'm now going to open up our previous blend file, and I'm going to go from object mode to edit mode. Edit mode allows you to directly manipulate the vertices, edges, and faces of your object. With the lasso tool selected, I'm holding down my left mouse button. Right now, I just want the point selected, and you can adjust that at the top. I accidentally selected her skirt in the middle, which I did not mean to, so I'm just going to hold down Control, and that will deselect the points of the middle character. The grease pencil drop down includes options to transform, interpolate, duplicate, and what I'm going to do right now is copy. For Mac users, it's Command C, and I just did Command V to paste, and I press G to grab, and I moved it because when you paste, it pastes on top of the original character. When it comes to selecting in edit mode, you have 3 different options. You have points, which is what I've used previously, strokes, and then finally points in between. That selects all the points that are between other strokes. A shortcut is pressing 1, 2, or 3, which I'm doing right now. 1 selects the points, 2 selects the strokes, and 3 selects the points in between. Up next is curve editing, which allow you to edit grease pencil strokes using Bezier curves. You can edit the curves with just the curve handles. Right now I'm pressing G to grab, but for curve editing, what you actually need to do is go to the end of like the line, and where that black circle is, you click on that, and that's how you do curve editing. In curve editing, you can adjust the curve resolution, threshold, corner angle, and adaptive resolution. So this feature controls the level of detail displayed in your curve geometry based on its own curvature. Now I'm clicking on extrude, and extrude shortcut E essentially extends the selected geometry, in this case a point, along its normal direction. Right under extrude is radius. Shortcut for a Mac is Option S. For Windows, it's Alt S. It expands or contracts the thickness radius of the selected points. In the grease pencil drop down, another option you have is the cleanup, which helps refine your drawings by automatically fixing any imperfections or errors. I'm going to select merge by distance, and it simplifies your drawing by combining nearby points into one. You can do that by adjusting the threshold at the bottom left. Zero seems like that's your original stroke, and then the higher you go, the straighter the line gets. Now I'm going to go from edit mode to sculpt mode. Sculpt mode lets you shape and refine your drawn strokes as if you're sculpting clay. The brushes that I use the most are push, which I have selected right now, and this moves points in the direction of the brush stroke. The next brush is twist, and this twists the points in counterclockwise if you have the plus selected, but if you have the minus, it is clockwise rotation. And finally, randomize, and that adds noise to the strokes you go over with the brush. Now I'm going to switch to, I'm going to come to weight paint in a second, but right now I'm going to go to vertex paint, and it's a simple way of painting color onto a grease pencil object. I'm going to go to my colored artwork. Right now, if I try to use the brush, it's going to color in everything within the drawing. So I am going to lock the other layers and just make sure that my colored layer is unlocked, excuse me. Right now, I am using the draw tool, which paints over a specified color over the object. You have 3 different modes: stroke, fill, and stroke and fill. I can't change it to fill. Even if I do, nothing will happen because when I colored in this character, I use a textured brush, which is only a stroke. Next is blur, and this smooths out the colors of the adjacent vertices. The tool under that is average, and that smooths the color by painting the average resulting color from all the colors under the brush. Smear smudges colors by grabbing the colors under the brush and dragging them. I kind of wish sometimes when I'm in draw mode that like blur, average, smear, I wish we had these tools in draw mode. That'd be great. And finally, replace. And this allows you to swap the colors of selected vertices with a chosen hue in grease pencil. I use the default green, but you can always go in and change the color. And the last mode is weight painting, and this is the process of assigning different degrees of influence to specific parts of a 2D object in Blender. And I did this previously in a video, and I'm going to link that in the top right where I go step by step in detail. But to give you the steps, the first step, I drew my 2D character with the grease pencil, added the armature, parented the character to the armature, and right now this is step 4. I'm going into vertex group to weight paint the body parts, and then in the final step you test it and see how it looks, and then you can go back to weight paint and make adjustments. More shortcuts in Blender. I've been going through them sporadically throughout the video, but here are more shortcuts. I went through this previously, but you can press tab to toggle between like edit mode, draw mode, or the last 2 modes that you're in. And you can always go to edit preferences and adjust that. What I mean by that is if you go to edit and then preferences and go to key map, there is an option where you can, right now I press tab to switch between modes, but you can click tab for pie menu, and then to switch between modes it will become control tab. Again, there's pretty much anything you want to adjust, you can adjust in preferences. S to scale, I move my mouse to the left to scale up, and then I move my mouse to the right to scale down. R to rotate, maybe I want to rotate it along the x-axis, so I'm going to press R and then X, and then maybe I want to move it 90 degrees, I would type in 90. And to undo, I press Command Z. Let me get out of camera view. Right now my camera settings is at 1080 by 1920, and I want to adjust that, so I'm going to hide all of my other, I just want to see my character. And now I'm going to go to my output properties tab, which kind of looks like something printing, and I'm going to change the X and Y resolution size. And now I'm going to get out of camera mode, but I need to adjust her to the camera. And I went over this previously, but right now I'm just going to lock the camera. So now when I scroll with my wheel in and out, I'm able to adjust the camera. Since we're playing with the camera, I'm gonna adjust the background. Right now it's just white and I want to adjust it to another color. You do that by going to the World Properties tab, which looks like a globe, and now I'm going to play around with the color. Now I'm playing with the shrink that's right under color. 0 is black, but the higher up you go, the lighter it gets. I normally like to keep it around 1.2. And I believe I said this previously, but it's personal preference. When I'm out of camera mode, I always go to Viewport overlays and turn on the X and Y axis. It just helps me stay organized and let me know where I am in the scene. Now I'm clicking shortcut Shift A to add a mesh. I'll just add a cube to go over snapping. Like when I'm snapping my character to the mesh, I'm aligning my character's elements like vertices or edges to the corresponding features on the mesh's surface. To show you, let me click on the snapping right there. Just clicking a bunch of different options to snap to, like vertex, edge, volume. Back to the shortcuts. By pressing Z, you can change from wireframe, material, solid, and rendered view. I'm now going to switch from object mode to draw mode. I'm just going to draw right now with my pen. I can go up and change the radius, or I can click shortcut F, and that will adjust the radius. Shift F changes the brush strength. I cleared out the scene. Now I'm going to click Shift A, grease pencil Suzanne, who is Blender's mascot, and I'm going to add her everywhere to this scene. There are times when I have a lot of things going on in my scene. I have a bunch of Suzannes, and for instance, if I want to just isolate one Suzanne, I click on it and I click / / and it isolates the object you select on, and then I would just click it again and it will bring me back to the scene. Back to draw mode. U changes the active normal material. So if I want to change it from a fill back to a stroke, you have that option. And then Y changes the active layer. You see it blinking at first, but you actually have to hold down Y and move your mouse to whichever layer you want it to, whatever layer you want to select. I'm going to go back to object mode by pressing tab. If I wanted to add a new window, you hover over the corner and wait till you see like a plus, and you're able to change the window to maybe the image editor or the text editor. To delete it, you get where you see the plus in between two windows and drag it to the left until you see that arrow, and then that removes the new window. Next is object constraints. Object constraints in Blender are rules you apply to objects to control their movement or behavior. To find constraints, you click on the tab right there, but I'm actually going to add a new grease pencil. I'm going to do Shift A, grease pencil blank. With this new grease pencil, I'm just going to draw a path around the Suzannes, and this is where my main character, her, is going to follow the path. Now that that's done, I am going to go to object mode, right click and convert to a Bezier curve, and it transforms our rough sketch into like a precise outline. I'm going to select it. Okay, I'm gonna select my character that I want to move along the path, and I'm gonna go back to the constraints tab. I'm gonna do follow path on the furthest right, and then where it says target, I'm going to select my curve. Now that that's done, I'm gonna see how it looks. Actually, I'm gonna hide my grease pencil. I just want to see my Bezier curve. I'm gonna click on my character again and click on animate path, and let's see how it does. Oh, that's so funny how she just keeps going. Oh, I thought it would just stop at the end. Ah, that's hilarious. When you open a 2D animation file, these are the workspaces at the top. 2D animation, 2D full canvas, compositing, and rendering. You can always, I right clicked, you can delete, duplicate, and click the plus to add more workspaces. Maybe this is how I want my default to be. And if I wanted to save this, so every time I open up a 2D animation file, it's 2D animation, full canvas, and animation, I would go to File, Defaults, and then Save, Startup File. And right under that, Load Factory Settings, it resets Blender to its default configuration. This is useful if you want to like start fresh, or if you made any significant changes and want to go back to the original. But be careful, it will overwrite any customizations you've made without the option to undo that. Also under File is Link and Append. Both are ways to bring objects or data from one blend file into another, but they work differently. When you link something, you're essentially creating a connection between the original object in its file and in the new file. So I'm gonna open up. If you watched my 31-day challenge, we made a home, and this is the home that I made. And I just scaled and moved the house back, and now I'm going to append a file. Append brings a copy of the object into the new file. And I am going to do, every Sunday I do a live stream with the grease pencil and Blender, and this is live stream number 2. This is just all of my studies. I'm clicking S to scale it up. I use Append the most. So if I wanted to go in here and adjust these characters, maybe color them in or sculpt, I'm able to edit with Append. Any changes I make to the characters here will not be reflected in the original file that I used to append. Now when I go to the house that I linked, I am not able to go in and edit it. So hopefully that helps describe the difference between link and append. Link, you can't edit it, but append, you can bring it in to a new blend file and edit it. I push back my 2D characters because I want to go over depth of field. Depth of field in Blender is like focusing your camera on a specific point while everything else blurs out. And one way to do it with the grease pencil is to go to Visual Effects and then Blur. I believe the default is 8, and you can see it kind of blurred out. What I've noticed, if I use the Visual Effects Blur, it only affects 2D. So that's why I'm clicking on Use Depth of Field. And now I'm going to click my camera because I want it to be a stronger blur effect, and I also want my house to be blurred. So I'm going to click Depth of Field with the camera icon and then click the drop down. When I click the drop down, I normally go first to f-stop, and that's like adjusting the camera's lens opening. A lower f-stop value means a wider lens opening, which gives me a blurry background that I want. And again, the higher f-stop means more sharp images. And I always like to play with the focus distance, and you need to be in camera mode to see it. But I usually like lower the focus distance to about 6 or 7. Now transitioning from depth of field to textured brushes. When I colored in my character, I used some of the textured brushes, and I'm going to show you how to do that step by step. When you open up a 2D animation file and go to draw mode and click on the brushes, you get 8 default brushes, but here I already have the textured brushes installed. So what I did is I went to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then type in grease, and then you need to make sure Grease Pencil Tools is enabled. Once that is done, you can click the bottom. I have autosave, but you can click save preferences. So you get out of that and then go to the tool tab. Click the drop down and then select download and import texture brush pack. Right there at the bottom, you should see brushes. Well, it should say 17 brushes, but they're already installed. And now when you go to your brushes, they should be there. I brightened up the background because now I want to go over keyframes. I'm going to go to add, grease pencil, and blank. And just going from object mode to draw mode, I'll just use the ink pen, which is the default brush. And I'm going to I'll just draw a heart at the bottom left. The dope sheet in Blender, it's like a timeline where you can see and edit the keyframes of your animation. A keyframe is kind of like a snapshot of your object's position, rotation, or scale at that moment. Right now, I am on frame number 1. Okay, I want to duplicate my heart, so I'm going to select the keyframe and then click Shift D to duplicate and then G to grab. So I'm going to grab it and move it to the end. Maybe about I'm moving my heart from the bottom left to the top right. So I just want to go to edit mode and then actually want it to be the lines. So let me move it. I'm pressing G to move it. Okay, now that my frames are where I want, the beginning and the end. Okay, I'm gonna leave my playhead in the middle. I could have stayed in edit mode, but I'm gonna go draw mode and go down to interpolate. Interpolate is right there. Interpolate kind of does the work for you. So I don't want to draw every single frame from frame 1 all the way to the end. So I'm gonna go to draw, interpolate, sequence, and it does the work for me. Let me play it. Okay, and that is my heart animation. I could just manually draw it. I'm just gonna draw a heart, and when I do that, it automatically adds a keyframe because I have auto keyframing on, which is that little blue button you see at the bottom. I'm going to redo the interpolation steps because at the bottom left you have this drop down where you can adjust the steps. Right now I have a keyframe at every one. You can change it to 2. You can change it to, right now I just have it on my active layer, but you can interpolate all the layers and there's more settings. I'm going to go down to the bottom, which is type. And this pop-up appears. You have all these different options. I'm gonna click circular interpolation. It creates a circular motion path between keyframes. It's commonly used for rotating objects around a fixed point, producing a smooth and continuous rotation. But be careful, once you select out of it, those options disappear. I'm now gonna go and manually draw each heart. Some more shortcuts while using the dope sheet. I'm going to click I in my drawing scene and you can have these menu options appear. I'm going to click insert blank into active layer and I just pushed it up just a little bit more. If you want to go from frame 1 to the very end, you can hold down shift and then click the left for the beginning or shift right to go to the end of the timeline. Pressing B for box select and then C for circle select. Pressing A selects everything in the timeline. Alt A, or if you have a Mac, Option A deselects everything. If I want to move a keyframe, I just select it and then press G to grab it and then place it where I want. I believe I went over this previously, but when you select a keyframe and you want to duplicate it, you press Shift D, and if you notice, the active layer turned green. That just lets you know, I mean, I only have one layer, but that lets you know what layer you're currently working on. And another shortcut is S, and that scales the timeline to make it shorter or longer. Now I'm going to trace an image to a grease pencil. I did Shift A, empty, then image, and right now I'm clicking rotate, R, X, and then 90 to rotate it along the X axis 90 degrees. And then I clicked open and I'm trying to find a reference image. When it comes to tracing a image to grease pencil, black and white is the best. Kind of think of it like a stencil. So right now I am going to right click the empty and then trace image to grease pencil, and this menu of options appears. I'm gonna adjust, I'll adjust the scale. Okay, I'm gonna click OK. You can't really see anything because I need to hide the empty. So right now this is my grease pencil object, and maybe I want to color in behind it. So I'm gonna click on the grease pencil, there we go, and then I'm going to the object data properties tab, and I'm going to create a new layer and put that under the trace. I do that because when I color, I want to color behind the trace, not on top of it. And I'm going to go to the materials tab and add a new, let me go from object mode to draw mode. I'll just keep it. So when I color right now, you'll be able to see the sky and like the water, but if you see those buildings, nothing is coming through. I need to adjust the trace layer, specifically the opacity. So I'm gonna change it to 0.99, and once I do that, my colors should be able to be seen. Tracing an image to the grease pencil, it's really useful for creating outlines or reference drawings for your animation or artwork. Another quick shortcut, when I want to move from side view or top view, I click the tilde button on a Mac, and that's able to have this pop-up window and it allows me to move to the desired view. I'm going to go over two different ways to convert grease pencil to 3D. I'm going to be drawing a tree, and I move the cursor to where it is, again by clicking shortcut Shift, then left click. When I moved around the scene, I realized I made a mistake. I forgot to change the stroke placement from stroke to 3D cursor. For me, it's personal preference, but I like to start out with 3D cursor for a project like this and then move it to the stroke when I'm drawing a tree. I like to move around to give it more of a 3D effect when I draw my branches. Now that my tree is done, I'm going to object mode, convert to path. I'm going to hide my grease pencil so you just see the path curve. Okay, and I'm going to go down to the data tab, and under geometry there is bevel, and this is where I'll make my path curve thicker. I'm gonna play around with the depth settings to find that looks pretty good. What if I adjust the resolution? I'll do it to like maybe 4. I enabled fill caps, and they control whether the ends of your curves or paths are open or closed. I want the base of my tree to be thicker, so I'm gonna go from object mode to edit mode and use proportional editing to achieve this. Proportional editing can be found at the top, what I just clicked. And a shortcut is by pressing O. In proportional editing, it's a way of transforming selected elements while also affecting the nearby unselected elements. It's very useful for smoothing deformed dense meshes. And this edit fall off option controls the range and intensity of this influence, allowing you to adjust how much surrounding geometry is affected by your edits. So right now I'm pressing G, and I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse to adjust the size. I'm gonna do the opposite with some of the branches on my tree. I think it's done, so I'm going to go to object mode, and now I want to change the color to a brown. I do that by going to the materials, clicking new, and then I'm going to change the base color. That was one way to make a grease pencil to a 3D tree, and we're going to do it again. Similarly, but it's a little bit different. I'm pressing G, then X to move along the X axis. I repeated the process by drawing my tree with the grease pencil, and now I'm going to go to object mode, right click, convert to this time Bezier curve. Off camera I went into sculpt mode and I made the trunk a little bit thicker, which when you convert it to a Bezier curve, it just goes to a curve, so that was kind of a waste of time. I'm in the data tab and I'm going to play with the geometry, more specifically the extrude. I went down to bevel and adjusted the depth, but that was too thick for me. Maybe if I adjust the resolution. I ended up beveling it 0.001. I went to the material properties tab, and again I'm gonna make it a brownish color. You can kind of see the difference when converting to a path or a Bezier curve. I think this scene would look better with an outline, specifically a grease pencil outline. So I'm going to go to grease pencil, and when you go to line art, you have 3 different options: scene line art, collection, or object. Before we do the line art, I am going to adjust my camera to make sure my house and both the trees are in view. Line art only appears through camera view. I like this view right here, so I'm going to go to view, align to active view, and that will put the camera wherever you are currently viewing. I think this looks good, so now I'm clicking Shift A, and the first is scene line art. And when you do this, it encompasses all the objects, collections, and elements present within the scene. So that would include my house and my 2 trees. You can adjust so much, and 2 of the things you can adjust are the line thickness and opacity. You can also adjust edge types. Right now the default is contour. You can change it to silhouette or individual silhouette. The next line art is collection line art, but before we do that, I am going to move one of the trees outside of this collection. Right now, the scene encompasses everything. Now the collection has everything except the tree. So when I add collection, the tree that wasn't moved out will be part of the line art. And finally, the object line art. But before we do that, I'm going to select my house because that's the only thing I want the line art to be applied to. Always have the option to reset your object. I'm going to hide the line art and move this up so you can see the object properties tab. Right now you can see the location, rotation, and scale. So I'm going to select my house and click Alt S if I had a Windows, but since I have a Mac, it's Option S to reset the scale, Option R to reset the rotation, but it was at 0, and then Option G to set it back to the origin point. Another way to combine 2D and 3D besides line art and a Bezier curve is, this is a 3D head that I sculpted. This is referenced from a video that I watched on YouTube by Marco, and I have a link to that in the description. So essentially you sculpt a 3D head and then you go over it with the grease pencil. My first drawing was, I wanted him to be like a tough army guy with his, his shades on. And then for the other drawing, I moved the lighting and added another camera to make him a cowboy. So this is just a fun way to combine sculpting and the grease pencil. grease pencil and geometry nodes. Right now I'm in Blender 4.2 alpha to show you guys how this works. So I'm going to edit, preferences, and then experimental, and I'm enabling grease pencil 3.0. I'm going to add Suzanne. I'm doing Shift A grease pencil, and then there she is, Suzanne, and that is the Blender mascot. I'm going to click the geometry nodes workspace at the top, and with Suzanne selected, I'm going to press new. I still have a lot to learn about geometry nodes, but for right now, I'm going to add a set position and random value node. I was reading and it said many geometry nodes that work for curves can also be used with the grease pencil in Blender. Easy HDRI add-on is a tool that simplifies the process of using HDRI images for lighting your 3D scenes. To import an external add-on, I actually went over this on day 28 of my 31-day challenge that I did earlier this year. I downloaded, or I got the add-on, and make sure it is a zip file. Don't unzip it. So when you save it to your desktop, go back to Blender and go to Edit, Preferences, and then with the add-ons, I'm going to do Import and go to my desktop to find the zip file, and then just click to enable it. And now our Easy HDRI add-on is good to go. But before we do it, I need to get a HDRI. So I'm at polyhaven.com, and they also have an add-on, but it is $5 if you sign up for their Patreon or $30 in the Blender market. I ended up with the Symmetrical Garden 2 HDRI, and I'm going to keep it 4K HDR, then just click download and again save it to your desktop. So back in Blender, I'm pressing shortcut in and going to my add-on and clicking the folder to find it on my desktop. And once I double click it, it should open up. So this is what an HDR looks like, but with the add-on you have a lot of settings that you can adjust. Another add-on that I use a lot is Image as Planes, and it's already in Blender. I'm going to do that to make a billboard. So I'm just going to edit preference and then typing in image, and it should show up. Import images as planes. So it's already enabled. And I'm going to Shift A, image as planes, and I'm just going to select a image that we worked on a image from a blend file that we worked on previously in this video. You also have the option to animate image sequences if I needed that, but right now I'm just doing one image, and I just brought it up to make a quick billboard. But you also can use it for backgrounds, references, or adding details. Another free add-on is Nijiji Pen. Hopefully I said that right. This aims at enhancing the 2D drawing features for grease pencil for graphic design and illustration purposes. Grease Pencil from Mesh is an add-on for converting mesh objects to full-color grease pencil objects or curves, with edge filtering for sharp edges, intersections, and round surface outlines. Story Pencil, created by the Blender developers, is an add-on that adds tools to help the storyboarding workflow using the video sequencer. It adds many features to help adding, editing, and rendering linked scenes. Last year, I took the Deep Paint course by Mr. Gaku, and we got this add-on in the course, but now he is selling it. And it is a user-friendly tool that allows you to model and paint in 3D using grease pencil to create stylized 3D illustrations. Whenever I'm looking for an add-on, I normally go to the Blender Market, which has a lot of great free and paid add-ons. When it comes to grease pencil resources, especially when I make a video like this, I reference the Blender manual, and right now with the latest release of Blender 4.1, I'll scroll down to grease pencil and it goes over everything. So if I need help describing something or going into more detail, I always reference the manual. When I want to learn about what the Blender team is currently working on or new features, I go to the developer forum. And I'm going to click on the previous week, May 13th, and you can see, and these are weekly updates. So you can go in and see announcements and everything that they're working on. I also heavily rely on YouTube when I want to see how something is done or if I have questions. The first is the Blender YouTube. They always have updates or their current projects that they're working on. Especially when I was starting out with grease pencil, I always turn to the grease pencil random tips and tricks playlist by the creator of Pepe School Land. He has a lot of great videos about grease pencil features. There's also a lot of grease pencil YouTubers like Sophie, Dedues, and Marco. I actually referenced his video, his sculpting and then drawing on top with 3D grease pencil. He has a lot of great videos. Located on the Blender Studios website is this grease pencil resources, which is full of demonstrations and tutorials. When I first started using Blender, I just passed by it, but it's just a page full of blend files. There are free blend files that you can download and learn how amazing grease pencil artists make their scenes. We are coming to the end. If you made it this far, you're a real one. I'm done with my scene. I'm going to the output properties and you can adjust the frame rate. I'm going to keep it at 24 and I want my animation to go from frame 1 to 250. And again, you can change that. And I'm going to click the output and I want this to be saved to my desktop. I'm going to keep the name the same. And I clicked FFmpeg video, but you can do PNG, JPEG, and as you see, there's a lot more options. And I'm going to change my encoding to MPEG 4, and I'll keep that the same. And I'm just going to change the output quality to high quality. And this is usually when I'm doing an animation, my settings. And when I'm happy with that, I go to render and then render animation. I really hope this video brought you some value, and again, thank you so much for watching and supporting me. Thank you. This is Joyce-Anne Anthony, aka JJ. Until next time.